The year is 1941. America has just entered World War II, and military planners are facing an impossible problem. They need to house, protect, and provide medical care for millions of soldiers being deployed to every corner of the globe, from the frozen tundra of Alaska to the scorching deserts of North Africa, from remote Pacific islands to the bombed-out cities of Europe. Traditional construction would take years. Shipping materials across oceans was dangerous and expensive. Time was running out, and soldiers were dying not just from enemy fire, but from exposure, lack of medical facilities, and inadequate shelter. Then, in the quiet halls of a Rhode Island manufacturing company, an engineer named George Fuller stared at a British design that would change everything. It was called a Nissan hut, invented during World War I, a semicircular steel structure that looked like half of a giant tin can laid on its side. It was simple, almost crude. But Fuller saw something the military desperately needed: a building that could be mass-produced, shipped in pieces, and assembled by untrained soldiers in less than a day. But there was a problem. The British Nissan hut was too small, too dark, and too prone to condensation. Fuller knew he could do better, working with the Quonset Point Naval Air Station in Rhode Island, which would give these structures their name. He redesigned everything. He made them larger, with a 16-foot radius that could accommodate 15 to 20 men comfortably. He added plywood interior panels for insulation. He created end walls that could hold doors and windows, flooding the interior with natural light. Most importantly, he designed them so that all the parts were standardized and interchangeable. Every bolt, every panel, every rib could fit any Quonset hut being built anywhere in the world. The first prototype was completed in 1941, and military officials were stunned. A team of 8 untrained men could erect a Quonset hut in just one day using only hand tools and a basic instruction manual. The entire structure could be packed into a single shipping crate and transported by truck, train, or ship, and they were tough-built to withstand hurricanes, earthquakes, and even bomb blasts. The military ordered 30,000 units immediately. But 30,000 wasn't nearly enough. As America mobilized for total war, the demand exploded. Factories across the nation retooled their production lines. Companies that had been making water tanks, grain silos, and railroad cars suddenly found themselves manufacturing Quonset huts. At the peak of production in 1943, American factories were churning out over 1,000 Quonset huts every single day. By the war's end, more than 170,000 had been produced, though the commonly cited figure of 100,000 refers to the main Quonset design, with additional variants pushing the total even higher. These weren't just shelters. They became the backbone of America's military infrastructure worldwide. On the beaches of Normandy, medics performed life-saving surgeries in Quonset huts set up just yards from the fighting. In the Pacific, they served as mess halls, where exhausted soldiers could get a hot meal after weeks in the jungle. On remote islands, they became churches where chaplains held services for men who might not survive the next day. They were command centers where generals planned invasions, radio stations that broadcast messages home, movie theaters that showed films to boost morale, and even ice cream parlors, because the military knew that small comforts could make the difference between hope and despair. The stories that emerge from these steel half-cylinders are almost too numerous to count. In the Aleutian Islands, where temperatures dropped to 40 below zero and winds exceeded 100 miles per hour, Quonset huts with extra insulation kept soldiers alive when traditional buildings would have been ripped from their foundations. In North Africa, where daytime temperatures soared above 120 degrees, the curved design allowed hot air to rise and escape, keeping the interior marginally cooler. In Italy, when a Quonset hut hospital took a direct hit from German artillery, the flexible steel structure absorbed the blast, collapsing in on itself but creating a pocket that saved the lives of 3 nurses and 7 patients trapped inside. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the Quonset hut was how quickly soldiers adopted and adapted them. These weren't just military-issue buildings, they became homes. Soldiers painted murals on the interior walls, built wooden partitions for privacy, and even installed makeshift heating systems using discarded oil drums. In the Pacific Theater, where mail took weeks to arrive, a Quonset hut post office became the emotional center of camp, the place where men learned they'd become fathers, received Dear John letters, or got word that their hometown sweetheart would wait for them. As the war progressed, military engineers developed specialized variants. The two-rib Quonset was larger, spanning 40 feet wide and able to serve as airplane hangars, warehouses, or assembly halls for hundreds of soldiers. Some were modified with extra windows and ventilation for tropical climates. Others were buried under earth and reinforced with concrete to serve as bomb-proof command centers. The design was so versatile that it was adapted for virtually every military need, even as floating docks and water treatment plants. Then, in August 1945, the war ended. Suddenly, America had hundreds of thousands of Quonset huts scattered across 6 continents and hundreds of islands. Bringing them all home would cost more than they were worth, so the military made an unprecedented decision. They would sell them as surplus for pennies on the dollar to anyone who wanted one. What happened next transformed post-war America in ways that few anticipated. Soldiers returning home faced a severe housing shortage, millions of them starting families, needing places to live, but finding cities and towns unable to accommodate them. Quonset huts became the answer. For as little as $1,000, about $17,000 in today's money, a veteran could buy a Quonset hut, have it shipped to a piece of land, and create a home. They added walls to create bedrooms, installed proper kitchens and bathrooms, built front porches, and planted gardens. Entire neighborhoods of Quonset huts sprang up, filled with young families beginning their lives together. But they became so much more than just homes. Farmers used them as barns and equipment storage. Small businesses discovered they made perfect workshops, warehouses, and retail spaces. Churches bought them for temporary sanctuaries. Schools used them as classrooms during the baby boom when traditional buildings couldn't accommodate the flood of students. In rural America, they became community centers, dance halls, and fire stations. The distinctive curved shape became part of the American landscape, a reminder of both sacrifice and ingenuity. Today, more than 80 years after the first Quonset hut was built, thousands still stand. Some have been lovingly restored and serve as homes, art studios, and boutique shops. Others have been placed on historic registries, preserved as monuments to the men and women who lived in them. During the darkest days of the war, architects have rediscovered their elegance, incorporating the curved design into modern sustainable building concepts. The basic principle is strong, efficient, easily constructed. Shelter remains as relevant today as it was in 1941. But walking through a surviving Quonset hut is to feel the weight of history in a way that few structures can evoke. You can almost hear the sounds that once filled these spaces. The nervous laughter of soldiers before a mission. The screams of wounded men being treated by candlelight. The quiet sobs of a young private reading a letter from home. The victory celebrations when word came that the war was over. These simple steel buildings witnessed the full spectrum of human experience during humanity's most devastating conflict. George Fuller, the engineer who refined the design, probably never imagined that his solution to a wartime logistics problem would become one of the most iconic structures of the 20th century. He certainly couldn't have predicted that his design would house everyone from Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower to unknown privates whose names are lost to history, or that these buildings would transition from tools of war to symbols of peace and post-war prosperity. The Quonset hut reminds us that innovation often comes not from elaborate plans or massive budgets, but from the urgent need to solve immediate problems. It shows us that the simplest solutions can have the most profound and lasting impacts, and it stands as a testament to the millions of soldiers, engineers, factory workers, and families who, in their own ways, built the world we inherited, one curved steel panel at a time.